I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 47. Today in the show, just like the clocks this past weekend, we're springing forward and discussing what our personal plans are for this spring to prep for the 2015 deer season. Shed hunting, scouting, food plots, we discuss it all and much more. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. And this week was the beginning of daylight savings time. And as we turn the clocks back, or actually turn the clocks up an hour, and officially, in my book, leapt into spring. So with that said, today I want us to take a break from our jam-packed guest episodes that we've had lately, and instead take some time to chat about what me and Dan are doing personally right now to prep for the 2015 deer season. But before we get into all that, Dan, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. The weather outside is gorgeous, and as soon as I'm done recording the podcast, I'm actually going to go get my daughter. And although the backyard's a little mushy and she may or may not get it, I'm going to have a little bit of a staged shed hunt with her, and we'll see what happens.
Nice. That should be fun.
Yeah. Yep. So I'll take a couple antlers or the antler that I found this weekend. I'll throw it under a tree or something, and I'll say, hey, let's go look for them, and take her downstairs first to show her again what they look like, and then I'll let her loose in the backyard and see if she can't find it.
That's an awesome idea. It sounds exactly like what I'm planning on doing after this call too. But instead of my daughter, I'm going to take my dog.
So what are you trying to say, Mark?
I don't even know. Basically, my dog's probably going to find more sheds than your daughter.
Probably.
Yeah. That's funny. That's a cool idea, though. I'm excited for you. I hope she likes it. What are you going to do, though, if she totally just utterly fails? Are you just going to give up on her as a shed hunter?
No, I won't. I'll give her a couple more tries, but I think I'll be more upset if she goes into the grass and just pulls out a gagger shed that has, that I've never seen before, or the neighbor didn't see, and just be like, are you kidding me?
What?
Yeah.
That'd be pretty sweet.
I'll give her a couple more tries before I make the final, if she makes the team or not.
I think that's probably a pretty good idea. I know if I got judged and if I could make the shed hunting team when I was 2 or whatever, I would definitely have not made the team. So
Right.
Oh, man. Well, speaking of shed hunting, though, we have a lot of shed hunting to talk about today, huh?
Right. Did you have a good time?
I did. And I guess I should preface, before we talk too much about that, about, why we're asking if I had a good time. Because, at the end of last episode, I was talking about the fact that I was supposed to go to Ohio to shed hunt this past weekend. But, as we talked about, there was a big snowstorm. And there was something like 8 inches of fresh snow at my Ohio property. And so on Thursday, my buddy Corey and I were looking at it, and there was just no way that we are going to go down there and really have a worthwhile trip with all that snow. So we canceled the trip, decided to push it back a week, and then we're sitting there and thinking, what are we going to do? Maybe we can shed hunt around Michigan a little bit. There's a lot of snow too, but I guess we could just walk around just to walk. But then I remember that you were going shed hunting this weekend. And gosh, my good old podcast co-host, you invited me and my buddy Corey to join you. So we did.
And once again, huge mistake on my part.
I thought you would have learned by now.
I guess I'm just a really nice guy, okay?
Yeah, I'll give you that.
So again, without spoiling anything, Mark finds the biggest shed again.
I did. And it was a last minute nail biter of a find too. It was the last shed of the trip. Last day, last probably half hour, and I pulled out the biggest shed. Yep. I'm a happy camper too, and what's cool is I took that shed back, and it was the freshest shed I had this year because that's the first shed that I really found, and brought it home. And last night I went walking through the woods and threw the shed off in the distance, and went back, grabbed my dog about a half hour later, and took him out in the woods and walked him around. We walked all over the property, and then finally I passed him by where that shed was. Passed him by about 50 yards downwind of it. And he was running along, and all of a sudden he hits a wall, slams on the brakes, turns and spins and runs 50 yards clear across the other direction, right to that shed.
Awesome.
So yeah, I love seeing that when he does that. So
maybe next year you'll have to bring him.
I know I want to bring him one of these times, and I want to bring him to Ohio when I go next too. But it just does present some logistical issues. Find a place I can keep him, and what if we're going to go in a restaurant or all these different things. So it always ends up being a little bit of a challenge. But I do need to just suck it up and bring him because he needs to get that experience in an area where where there's actually sheds to be found.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
But it's fun. It's fun. But what do you think? Should we regale our listeners with the story of the weekend?
Yeah, I had a blast. I know we didn't find a lot of sheds. I think what was our total? 6?
I think 5.
Five sheds. Five sheds. But guys like us, we make the best out of an average situation. So
yeah. We got there Friday afternoon, me and Corey, after about a 7.5 hour drive, and right away you took us out to one of your spots. And what did we do? We walked. Gosh, what was that first spot?
That first spot was down at that river bottom, and where those standing beans were at. Yes. And I had really good luck there every year. The river hadn't come up yet to flood everything out, and I've had one of my best shed hunting days there in the past, and we got skunked. But the sign was there, and as you saw, that the sign was there. A lot of buck sign and a lot of awesome bedding, but just no sheds.
Yeah, I was really surprised, especially that little section where there's all those standing beans still. Like that was the first place we went to, and I was like, we're gonna find some sheds here, no doubt about it. Standing beans, perfect. But I think there's some of them were moldy, and there had been some water in there, and I think that might have kept them from popping in there as much, and wasn't there. But gosh, we went. I think the highlight of my night, really, the shed hunting wasn't so great that night, but we went to a bar that night, and there was a really, really darn good buffet. Right, that was a pretty good buffet.
Yeah, catfish, whitefish,
fried
chicken, and steak cutlets.
Yep.
Salad bar,
fried shrimp.
Fried shrimp. Yep. Oh, it was good.
Mashed potatoes, corn, green beans.
Yeah, the real deal. Yeah. And that the good thing about that is that restaurant is in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's definitely not a fancy place, but it's like a nice, good food. It's a good little spot.
Yeah, and I told you it used to be a biker bar before they renovated it. That wasn't family friendly.
No, it didn't sound like it. Didn't you say that they were like tire skid marks within the bar back in the day?
They used to bring the motorcycles into the bar and do peel outs in there and get all liquored up and probably a little bit more than liquor, and had a good old time. The owner of the bar, every 4th of July, used to build a bonfire and then ramp his motorcycle through it. So every year he'd get hurt because he ramped his motorcycle through a bonfire, and Oh yeah, man, I'm badass. Greatest day of my life, 4th of July.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Wow. Well, yeah, definitely has changed a lot since then. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's a fact. For the better.
Yeah, I'd say that they've got really good service too.
Yeah.
You
They
know why I
do.
say that? Because
She complimented you on your tea.
we're sitting there at dinner, and somehow the topic of my beard or lack thereof came up. I think we were talking about your beard and then my beard, and how they're pretty close, right? I mean, they're pretty similar, but maybe yours just a little better, right?
I guess everybody has their own opinion.
And then the waitress comes by, and of course, only you would do this. You grab the waitress, you're like, "Hey, what do you think about his goatee?" And then you put her in that awkward spot. What did she do? She didn't know what to say.
She was just kind of taken back at first, but then she complimented you while we were on our way out the door.
Yeah, on the way out, she's she was.
You do like, yeah, you do have a good goatee.
I think it wasn't even that good. I think she said, "It's not bad."
Yeah, and then you guys started flirting.
No flirting. But I do think you were describing, and you're like, you know what you look like, Mark? You look like a rookie major league pitcher that just came out of college, just trying to get some facial hair.
Yep. Trying to make it big, trying to get that Gillette sponsorship.
Uh-huh.
And you just got to, you just need more time. The big money in in sponsorships isn't coming until you can really drop the hammer, so to speak, on the man goatee. And as soon as that, then Gillette starts calling. Nike, hell, you may even be getting sponsored by a company that makes beard nets for.
That really is the peak. That's the peak right there. You can get to that point. Well, on our drive home, me and Corey were talking about someone that went to I think it was somebody he went to high school with, or he knew a friend that played college baseball, and he was a little skinny guy, kind of like me, skinny, not a whole lot of facial hair, not real big, but he went home over the summer, and when he came back the next fall, all the baseball players on his team couldn't believe it was the same guy. He was huge, full beard, and he was really big, and what in the world happened to you? And he said, well, I was working on the farm all summer, and then my dad had these horse steroids that he said I should start taking. So I might start taking some of those to get the full beard effect.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So that was day one. Day two.
Day two was our big walk.
Day two was
10 hours?
10 hours, and that was hashtag Shed Rally.
Shed Rally.
Yes. We.
How many times do you think we yelled that?
At least 50, probably.
50. Yeah. And then we'd say, just practicing.
Yep. Because we were going to yell Shed Rally if we found a shed, and then we never found a shed.
No. And I think the huge issue with that, with our lack of shed finds, was we did not follow Dan Perez's instructions and rake waterways. We didn't rake any ponds. And I think that had a lot to do with it. If I would have brought the old rake, we would have been stacking them.
We definitely talked about it a couple times, didn't we?
Yeah.
It would have been interesting. Who knows? I mean, it's a really interesting idea. Unfortunately, all the ponds that we passed were frozen, and we didn't have a rake.
Right.
But it's an interesting one. Someday, maybe we'll give it a shot. But yeah. We weren't finding the sheds. I think, like we talked about, when it comes to shed hunting, lots of times, really, it's where the late season food is.
Right.
And a lot of your late season food, the bean fields were flooded out, and you have some neighbors that have very, very good late season food.
Yep, to the north, to the south, and to the east. So,
and that seems to really pull them away.
They're like a sponge. And I mean, compared to what we found to what they found, and that's one day for them. And we walked for 15 straight hours, almost 15 hours total.
Yeah. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, if you want.
Can you share the details about who that is, or do you want to keep that disclosed?
Well, I'll tell you this. I hunt next to two very well managed farms. One of them is a very well known hunting TV show, and every year they have, they find a ton of sheds. They kill huge bucks, and I'm just fortunate that I can get some of the residual off of off of their, their time and energy. I get some wandering bucks come through my area sometimes, and I think we talked about it. I get like random 200 inchers or booners come through once a year. I'll catch one random giant roaming deer on one of my trail cameras that maybe just have 3 pictures of him, and that's it. And he's coming from one of those farms, but very well managed. And then when shed hunt season comes, all the food's gone. They have several 100 acres of food plots. It makes shed hunting difficult on my properties when their property draws them in like a sponge.
Yeah, we'll call it the celebrity shed effect.
That's right. That's right.
They pull all the sheds. And interesting story related to this, right?
Right.
That we discovered last night. I get a text message from my buddy Corey, and he was on these person's Facebook page, and they had posted a picture of all the sheds they found on Saturday, the same day we were out there looking. And like you mentioned, they found a whole crap ton compared to us. And Corey goes, dude, those sheds, that's Mark Kenyon.
Yep.
That's the Mark Kenyon buck, the buck that you
Yep.
named after me because I found his shed last year.
Yep. And it is. I looked at it, and it is exactly that.
Oh, yeah.
That huge matching set on the front of the very front.
Yeah?
I believe I have that right side from last year.
Really? Is that a buck that you had been hunting and that you knew?
Nope, just a random shed I found. Actually, I found it on that first place that we went.
Okay, nice.
On that bottom standing bean field. So that's where I found him the first that last year. So
About how far away is that, do you think? I mean, that's a couple miles, isn't it?
yeah, it's a mile or so. So it's crazy how that time of year, as soon as the food runs out, they go like in the timber or, egg fields start drying up. They'll go to the last possible food source. So the property that I hunt is, giant timber. So to the south and to the north are these managed farms with food plots. Depending on where these deer end at, whatever closest one there to is where they're going for the rest of the winter. So that one buck probably just was closer to that bean field or that corn. It was corn last year, and was just happy. He was closer there, so that's where he stayed the entire summer or the entire winter.
Yeah.
And they go back to their summer fall range, which is the property that I can hunt, and they get back there probably about I'd say April is when they start coming back.
Nice. Well, it's even though it's a bummer for shed season, usually it's a nice benefit you have during most of the rest of the season, at least during the rut when they're moving through.
Right.
Because, man, I really hope that Mark Kenyon doesn't spend too much time on their property because I was going to say I want you to get a shot, but then
it depends if you want to give your antler up or not.
Right. For a second there, I was feeling really generous, but now I don't know. Maybe I got some leverage on them. Maybe I can be like, hey, next year, that buck made it through this year, so what? He's going to be like a 6.5-year-old or a 7.5-year-old this year, probably.
Yep.
I mean, what do you think he scored last year? He was high 60s, don't you think?
Yeah, he's definitely high 60s, mid to high 60s. Yeah.
So next year he's probably a booner. So these folks are probably going to be targeting him next year, and I'm going to have his shed. I'm going to say, hey, if you want this shed, how about you let me hunt your farm?
Yeah, they'll think about that.
Yeah, I think that'll work real well.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
That's funny.
Yeah, but that's pretty cool. But also kind of a bummer because I was really hoping to find those sheds, or one of us to find those sheds, and there they were on their table.
I want to talk about something real quick.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I want to talk about the rules that we established for shed hunting.
Yeah, we didn't get to talk about that last week.
Right. So I get a little Facebook message from someone saying that, that's politics. That's just shed hunting politics or something like that. I don't even know. I don't even remember. And he's like, why do you, this guy said something about, I don't understand why you would give away a shed if you were the person who found it. Well, I just have to explain myself. Okay. First off, we'll say the rules. The rules are, if you find a shed, the very first shed of a matching set, and that's to be determined by the group. If I was to find the first shed, and then let's say Mark would find the second side to that rack, Mark would give it up. And that reason is because I feel that if both antlers are found, they need to be together. That's the deer grew that, and that's just kind of what I think. What are your thoughts on that?
I like it. I think, it's obviously, these are rules that, I don't know, some group of friends started that we've just been passing them along, and it's what I've always heard and what I've always abided by, and I know same for you. It's obviously nothing written in stone, and it's not like everyone does that.
Federal law.
No, there's no shed hunting law, but it seems to be a generally accepted, just kind of unwritten rule that it just seems to be the right thing. If you've got that antler, you want to match it up. You want to have that match set. Getting a match set is pretty special, and if you already have that first half, it just feels like the right thing to do. And I think, it sucks giving up a shed to someone because, it's a great excitement to find a shed. We don't find a whole lot, so when you find one, you want to keep one. But I think, when you give one up, karma comes back. Ooh, I'm knocking over picture frames over here. Karma comes back around, and you'll get yours eventually. So I'm totally okay with that, and I know that if I found a shed, like a big shed, like one of the ones that like a buck I've been following, and then my buddy found the match, it would be amazing to have both. And so knowing that would be the case, I'm totally fine giving up a shed.
Of the 5 biggest sheds that I've ever found, I've had to give 3 of them up because one was the person found one the matching side the day before. And the second reason, which is rule number 2, if somebody kills that deer, whoever kills the deer gets all the antlers from all the years. So it's just like that story all has to live in one spot. It's not like, like for me, if I killed Mark Kenyon, and I'm just going to use this as an example. Uh-huh. I kill Mark Kenyon and I have his mount on the wall. It would be so awesome to say, and here's his antler from 2 years before that my good buddy Mark Kenyon found.
Absolutely.
Show him the pictures and whatnot, and it's like back to I think how me and you really are. It's all about a story. Yeah. It's sometimes they end on a good note, sometimes they end with a question mark, and I just think it's one of those things that it all has to come together at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm right there with you. I think that's a great rule to have. I think it benefits, like you said, benefits the story, and being able to have that shed really just can, it's a special thing. And if you have that connection with a deer, you end up killing a deer, maybe it's a deer you've hunted for a couple of years, whatever it is, you're deserving of having that bone. So if you do kill Mark Kenyon, the deer, I will be happy to give you that shed back, and I'll be excited to be a part of that story in some small way. So, yeah, so see if we can pull it off your neighbors and get that slobber knocker next year, because he's going to be a stud.
Yeah. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna make some kind of adjustments, and I know we'll get into that here in a second. But my next question to you is, are you still friends with Corey Fall?
You even put the full name out there. He's really going to get thrown under the bus now. Yeah, I am. And I know you're bringing this up because, there's the potential that he broke potentially the third rule of shed hunting to a degree. I mean, it's not one that I call as, it's not as important as the others. It's hard to do. It's hard to abide by.
Right. It's one of those things that you really have to pay attention in order to follow it. And it's hard to, especially when the terrain is like it is on my farms, where it's not in a straight line. And I'm just bringing it up basically to give him some crap, but I've seen it the opposite way, where someone will be walking down a deer trail, find a giant antler. And I gave you a specific example of that, but they found this giant, like 80-point side, 85-inch antler.
Yeah, not an 80-point side.
No, 80-point side, yeah, 80-inch, 85-inch antler. And so as this guy's taking pictures, another person kind of continues the shed hunt in his line and doesn't give him the opportunity to find that himself. We're kind of digging deep on this third rule, but the guy ended up finding it, and then didn't give it, then broke rule number 1 and didn't give it up.
Yeah, which is pretty lousy across the whole board.
Yeah. Oh well. I mean, It is what it is. And that shed that the second guy found was like 94 inches. Oof. So, it would be tough for some people, and those rules probably weren't established at the time of that shed hunt. But it's one of those things where whenever I go shed hunting, I always ask what the rules are, because I've been shed hunting before where the guy who owns the property wants to keep the sheds.
Right.
That's fine with me if that rule's established right off the bat.
Right.
Or if sometimes people have other rules, or I don't know what they may be, but if they're brought to attention right off the bat, it can. I can see to where people would get in huge arguments about it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, because people get pretty excited about antlers. So it's best to, if you're going out together and you're looking for antlers and it's on someone else's property or whatever it is, it's just good to get, hey, these are the basic guidelines we're going to follow here, and here's the plan. And, when it comes to, like you mentioned, walking lines, it's just basic kind of shed hunting etiquette that, when you're walking a property with several people, right, you all kind of say, okay, I'm going to work this line here. I'm going to work the top of the ridge. So-and-so is going to work 3/4 down. So-and-so is going to work the bottom. That way you're not all crossing each other all the time, and then you each walk your own respective line. It will call it the line. And then that way everyone has their own opportunity to find sheds in that path in front of them. Right. And then, sometimes, inevitably, like you mentioned, because of terrain or different things, there's going to be some narrowing down. People are going to have to get closer to each other. You might cross a little bit here and there when you're making turns and whatnot. But, what could be disrespectful is, if we agree we're all going to walk these separate areas, and then someone keeps popping in front of you and, looking at your stuff too, and then you don't have the opportunity to find any sheds. So. Yep.
Well, and the main reason I bring a rule like that up is because if you want to cover as much area as possible, you can't be crisscrossing each other. That way you have the potential for missing sheds. And for me, I only have this one weekend to go. I want to make sure we're covering as much ground as possible and finding as many sheds as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a smart way to shed hunt, and it's a way to keep it from being such like a deathly competition, because if everyone's kind of in a free for all, then you're gonna have people like trying to get ahead of people. Yep. If everyone's out for themselves. This way, when you have kind of a basic assigned area that you're looking that way, everyone can go about it. And I kind of look at it as, what, I used to, when I was early on, I was always stressed about like trying to be in the right place before anyone else maybe. But now it's, what, I'm just gonna walk my little spot, and if I get lucky enough to find one, I get lucky enough to find one. If not, don't worry about it. Eventually I'll have my opportunity. And it's a dumb thing to get stressed out about. So
It's supposed to be fun.
yeah,
I mean, all we did this whole weekend was laugh and make fun of each other. That's all we did.
and that is a good shed hunting weekend in my
That
opinion.
is good.
So
That is good.
so yeah, it was a lot of fun. And thank you again for letting us come down there and walk your property and bring home a couple sheds. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I had a blast, man.
Yeah. Before we jump off the shed hunting topic, we've talked about this a little longer than I thought we would, but I really quickly want to share my plans for this coming weekend, and that'll be kind of a good.
I cannot wait to see what you find.
Yeah, I'm as excited as I was to come down with you. I'm maybe more excited from a deer hunting perspective to go down to Ohio because of everything that's going on down there.
Well, and you get to hunt that property.
Yeah. So it's gonna be money because since we waited a week, all that snow is gonna be melted, and it'll just have melted. It's probably gonna be finished off melting maybe Wednesday or Thursday, and we're gonna get there Friday. So the snow is just gonna come off. Hopefully those antlers aren't all chewed up. And on my Ohio property, we've got just nothing but awesome late season food, great cover, and I've got permission to shed hunt, a bunch of properties right around there where I know these deer were hanging out in the late season. I mean, I was there in January 2nd. I saw Glenn, who was pushing Boone and Crockett. I saw Blades, who's mid 130s. We've got trail camera pictures of several other of our really good bucks still late in the season that were, alive and well, hanging out in the area. I saw Junkyard just around the corner on a neighboring property, a 180. So there's all these good deer that are in the area still. And I had standing beans on my neighboring property that I can shed hunt and cut corn on my property. So, these deer are going to be there, and it's just a matter of finding the sheds. But I can almost guarantee there's going to be a lot of sheds in the area.
Yeah, man. I hope you find them. I wish I had properties that have that food description. Well, it's not every day you run into a standing bean field like what you're going to be walking into.
Yeah, it's a kind of a lucky situation where they couldn't harvest it. And when I was there at the end of the season, deer were just piling into it. And then I went back again January 26th for a little other thing I did down there. I wasn't hunting, but I was in the area checking some things out, and I was standing out in those fields at the end of the night, and like 25 deer were piling out into the field again. So, I mean, they were still in there at the end of January, so I'm sure that they were there when they were dropping sheds. But even more exciting than finding the sheds to a bunch of these deer that I've been hunting a couple of years, that's going to be awesome if I can find those sheds. But probably what I'm the most excited / nervous about is to hopefully, to some degree, one way or the other, get some closure on the Jawbreaker situation.
So what's your gut feeling?
My gut feeling, I've thought through this over and over again, but I think my gut, unfortunately, I think he's dead. And I think what probably happened is that shot was low and back. It deflected off that limb, so it was low and back. I think it was probably the kind of shot where, and I hate that this happened, but I think it was the kind of shot where he probably survived a couple days. Maybe 3, 4, I don't know, a week. I think it's the kind of thing where he might die from infection.
Yeah.
Which is the worst possible case scenario. I really hope that was not the case. But I just feel with that shot, I think is probably what happened. So my thought process is that I tracked him for those 2 full days afterwards. I don't think he died yet, but I think that most likely he probably returned to one of his main bedding areas, and my thoughts are maybe he succumbed in one of those locations. And so, if that did happen, I guess the best case scenario, assuming that worst case scenario happened, would be I'm hoping that I can at least find him and know what happened, and then be able to have that memory there and that token of this deer that I had such incredible several year hunt for. But either way, hopefully I'll find him and I'll know what happened. Or what I really hope will happen is that it'll be a miracle, but hopefully I'll find his sheds. And if I find his sheds, I will be like a kid on Christmas morning.
Yeah, I'm rooting for that, man. So I that brings me up. That's kind of story, and I don't remember if I asked it on the podcast where we talked about your hunt for Jawbreaker, but when you shot him and you didn't find him, did you start gridding that property, or did you just look in the general area where you thought he might have went?
Yeah, so the first day we blood trailed as far as we could, and then we started grid searching the areas where we thought he would go. And then the second day, we tried the blood trail again with the dog for about half of the day. And then the second half of the day, I just grid searched every square inch of all the properties I had permission to be on.
Okay.
So I checked every creek, every pond, every bedding area, every thick spot, every blowdown, every ridge, everything.
So now you have permission to shed hunt some of these properties that surround the properties that you can hunt.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think if he did in fact end up dying at some point,
That's where you're going to find them.
I think there's a good chance I'll be able to find him.
Yeah.
So we'll hopefully I'll know one way or the other, and we'll have some type of closure to that story, and we'll be able to move on from there. But who knows? Maybe somehow he made it through, and maybe his sheds will be there, and Glenn's sheds will be there, and Blade's sheds, and Beast and Junkyard, and all those stupid slob knockers will be in there
In one giant pile.
in one massive pile right there, just waiting for us. So hopefully that's what'll happen. So that's the plans for this weekend. I'm excited, and it makes me think about everything else I have to do leading up to the 2015 season, because there's a lot of it. And that's what I was hoping we could spend the last half here of the episode talking about, is the things that we can do right now as spring starting, what we can do in the spring to start preparing for the deer season, which it's going to be here before we know it. So there's a handful of different things I've got going on, and some kind of interesting plans on my front. But I'm curious to kick it over to you first, Dan. Do you have anything that you're already doing or already thinking about, planning for, that you want to do in the next couple weeks or months to start that preparation?
Yeah, I mean, well, as you know, and you're the same way, and you never really stop planning for a deer season. I mean, as soon as this deer season was over, although this past deer season I was focused on getting my buddy Ryan a buck, and I kind of came second. This year, I'm back to hunting again. And, what I'm thinking about right now is, there's a couple things. One is still narrowing down to try to find the perfect stand location. Knowing what crops are going to be in what fields will help. But, it's not going to be too long in April, and I'm going to start setting out mineral stations again and getting my trail cameras back up. The deer may or may not be recognizable, but it will give me a great idea of who made it through the winter. And, that can tell you a lot about the upcoming season.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, other than that, I mean, I have one, I don't know if you want to talk about that right now, but that pinch point stand.
Yeah, what's your plan with that?
Well, what we noticed is I wrote an article in the Nine Finger Chronicles about this particular pinch point. Okay. And what we were finding is that some of the deer, not all of them, some of them were skirting that area, meaning we were missing shot opportunities because of a gap in a fence. Now, I think one plan, and there's a couple ideas I'm trying to think of how to solve that problem, but I need to close that gap or move my tree stand. So I'm thinking what's going to be the easiest is actually, it's going to be hard up front, but it's going to make more sense long term for the actual stand, because I already have a stand hung or lanes trimmed. I'll just have to go back in and do some light trimming when I set the stand up again in August. But I'm going to cut, the farmer needs a whole bunch of locust trees cut out of the CRP field. So I'm going to take all those trees and I'm going to stack them down in this low spot where they're crossing, basically making a little wall and forcing them to use the fence crossing that I originally determined as the best place to get a shot. So it's going to take probably some summer, as soon as the ground gets dry enough to where, when I can get on my hands and knees, I'm not going to get sopping wet. I'll start cutting down some of these trees, piling them all down in that bottom ravine. And hopefully that deters them from that area, and they come all the way up to where my stand location is.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co, and make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
It's an awesome idea.
Yeah.
I think that's really smart, and that's something that, this time of year, a great thing to do is exactly what you're doing. Going and looking at your current stand locations, analyzing what you learned from the previous season. How are deer using it? How did the wind affect your hunts? How are you able to get in and out? And then start thinking about what little tweaks can you make to those locations to make them even better. So in your case, block one of their paths so that they'll use the path that's better for you. That makes all the sense in the world. And you're stacking trees. Another way to do it is hinge cutting. If there's already small trees around there, you can hinge cut those trees, where you cut a small tree partway through and bring that top down to the ground. That works as a really good barrier, and creates more cover too. Another option, which is the opposite, is in the case where you have a farmer's fence. This is just the low farmer's fence. Deer, as they love the path of least resistance. And so if you've got a normal farmer's fence that goes all the way across, let's say a fence line, and you have a tree stand in one corner, maybe, if you want the deer to start using that corner more often, do something. If you have permission, or if it's your farm and you can do whatever you want, cut that top wire, or pull that top wire, wrap that top wire with a piece of rope and pinch that down so that there's a little bit lower wire there, and that will encourage the deer to cross there more than anywhere else because it's easier. And that's a great way to help funnel the deer movement where you want it. There's lots of really cool ways you can do that with habitat improvements or little tweaks like what you're doing, to just fine-tune sets. And I think, one of the biggest things that I've learned about hunting deer, especially when it comes to mature bucks, is that the details matter. And, for a long time for me, it was, just getting in the right area, just seeing the big deer, just getting the basics right. But then once you get to that point, it really becomes a game of inches, and you have to start looking at all the little things, all the tiny things you can put in your favor, because there's so many things that go wrong when you hunt these deer, that every little chip that you can have on your side is going to help. And I think this is the time when you can really start addressing those details. This period of time when we're not worried about actually hunting, this is when you need to, even though you want to go bass fishing and you want to go turkey hunting and you want to do all these other things, it's important to still focus on some of this deer prep, because this is the time of year that you have the time to go in there and make these little changes, make these adjustments, and then it's really going to pay off once the deer season comes, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree 100%. And unlike you, I don't have to worry about planting food plots because I don't have properties that necessarily allow for that. I don't need to hinge cut because the timber that I hunt in is enrolled in a forestry program, so I can't cut trees. I get away with cutting some shooting lanes, but that's a little bit different than hinge cutting several trees to create a giant bedding area. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So my my focus is more towards the micromanagement of my tree stand locations as opposed to finding ways to hold or grow deer.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think everyone has to look at their own,
Yep,
everyone
it's
has,
different.
yeah, exactly. Everyone has a unique situation. And yeah, it would be awesome. I mean, lots of people would say, "Oh, I wish I owned my own ground. I could do whatever I want." And yeah, that'd be amazing. But I think each one of us just needs to, look at whatever the situation that we have, and then do whatever you possibly can do to improve it. So if you hunt public land, all you can probably do is just adjust your tree stand locations. But kind of like you, all right, if that's all you can do, then dive in full force and do everything you can to tweak those to perfection, adjust it, learn about how those deer are using that area, and use this time to start doing some of that work. If you own ground and you can make improvements, well, yeah, go ahead and do those things. But in my opinion, take advantage of whatever opportunities you have to improve your situation, and don't just sit there and don't do any work, but then complain every deer season when, oh, big buck got out of range again, or can't quite close the deal again.
Yep.
But you're not ever trying to do any work to improve that.
Well,
So
and like me and you stress all the time, the work you do now prevents you from doing the work in October and November when instead of cutting tree stands or shooting lanes and instead of having to do all this last minute work, you can focus on hunting and not on everything else.
yeah, absolutely, you got to do the work now, and then
Yep.
you cash in on that work in the fall. And I think the more you do that, the better off you're going to be consistently across, whether it's public land, private land, lease, owned property, no matter what your situation is. The more work you do earlier, the better off you're going to be come season.
Yep.
So now's the time to do it. And that's got me thinking about some of my plans too. Is there anything else that you want to touch though on that you're working on right now before I dive into a couple of things that I'm thinking about?
Not really, other than, just doing what I've always done. But I think I'm going to make one little change this year. And early season, I'm going to actually focus on parts of the timber that I've never hunted before that may necessarily not have the largest amount of sign for one reason, and that's to confirm that there may or may not be any deer movement in that area. And no information is still information about the grand scheme of things. So I think even if there's zero deer that work by there on like the 2 or 3 times that I may hunt it, that lets me know that I really don't need to worry about that. And it's then like me, I'm an overanalyzer about tree stands. So knowing that that particular area is out of my head, I don't need to worry about it. It just means that I'll make a better decision when it comes time to set my stands and hunt my stands.
That's an awesome point. And it brings to mind something I'm actually working on an article about. And I don't remember, I'm not sure where I originally heard about this concept, but basically the idea of having a deer desert or a deer kind of no man's land. So like you said, you want to know where those areas are where the deer aren't typically going to be. And I think there's real value to having those on your property. I want places on my property where deer aren't going to hang out. I think that, that's kind of counterintuitive to some people. Some people are like, well, why in the world would you want that? I want this to be the best possible deer habitat everywhere. I want deer everywhere. I want as many deer as possible. But actually, in my opinion, you really do want concentrated areas where, okay, I'm pretty sure there's going to be deer here and here and here at certain times of the day. But then I also want to know at certain times of the day where deer will not be, because, we need to access. We need to have safe places that we can move through to get to where we're going to hunt, where we're not going to spook deer. I need safe areas where my wind can blow, where there shouldn't be deer. Having those deer deserts is a really important asset if you want to be able to hunt deer without them knowing that you're doing that. And so that's something I'll go into probably more detail at a later point, but it's something to think about when it comes to hunting, like in your case, learning where those places naturally are. And then it's something to think about when you're doing, if you own property, when you're actually doing habitat improvements, be careful not to destroy a deer desert that's a good deer desert to have. Don't go planting food plots every possible place, because all of a sudden you're never going to be able to get into your property without spooking a bunch of deer. So, really it's something that people need to think about. And I certainly have learned the hard way a couple times about the risk of getting rid of deer deserts because it can put you in a position where you're educating deer a lot more than you want to. So that's an interesting point you make.
Now, I'm going to transition by asking you a question. This weekend we talked a lot about food plots. We had that conversation up on that the last day we shed hunted about how awesome would it be if you own this property and we could turn this little area into a food plot.
Yeah.
So what I want to know on your farms, or that you are going to be doing some food plots, is did the food plots that you planted last year work? And if they didn't, what are you planning on doing this year to fix that problem?
Yeah, good question. So it's a yes and no answer. From a purely holding deer in the area and providing nutrition for the local deer, they certainly worked. I had lots of food for the deer that lasted through well into the season. I've got some late season food sources that they're still hitting right now.
What were they? What are those late season ones?
Yeah, so I planted overall on my main hunting property where I'm able to do habitat improvements. I planted several different food plots of oats and wintergreens, which are Whitetail Institute's brassica food plot blend. So oats,
Gotcha.
wintergreens, and then a little bit of clover. And so what I did I've got two main food plots, and one of them is kind of a 3-part food plot that kind of looks like a half a pie. I planted strips. So I planted a strip of brassicas, a strip of oats, a strip of brassicas, a strip of oats. And what I've got, those oats are the early season food. So the deer were hitting that in late August, September, October, into early November. And then once the really cold weather start hitting, then they move over to the late season foods. Which are the brassicas. So what I was able to do is, by having both of those crops within the same area, I was able to establish a consistent pattern that kept deer coming to that area no matter what time of the hunting season it was. So I definitely had deer using those areas all the time. I had those throughout the entire season. And my issue this year was just from a hunting standpoint. I don't even know if it was an issue with the food plots. It was more so just the population, just my deer hunting situation. As we talked about last season, there just weren't the bucks in the area that I was interested in hunting. There was only one deer that I really was targeting, and I could never quite get him on my farm. He was always in the outskirts. I saw him a couple times, but I think the larger issue is that the majority of this farm is open ag land that I have no control over. It's farmland and I can't do anything about it. And that property got tilled up in the middle of October because it was beans this year, and so they just disked it all up in middle of October. And once that happened, and 70% of the whole property is now just a big dirt field, it just killed the deer movement in general. And all I could do was hunt the edges, this little bit of timber and swamp I have that usually, there's some kind of crop in the middle of it all that facilitated, that kept deer on the edges crossing in between and out and in and to my food plots and everything. But once I had this giant wasteland of dirt, deer still use my food plots, and that was my saving grace, actually. If I didn't have those food plots, I wouldn't have any deer at all. So I did still keep deer there, but the issue is that because of my limitations, I can only put food plots in these couple locations because it works out with the property owner. Those are on the edges of my property. So in a perfect world, I would have those closer to the center so that deer would be moving towards the food and I could hunt out towards the edges in the timber. But just because of these limitations, I can't do that. So I wish I could relocate them to a degree, but I can't. But when it comes to the actual, the food itself, that worked great. It kept deer in the area. The only issue I had was with the front food plot that I planted. You can see it from the road. So what I did is I planted a food plot screen of Egyptian wheat, and that blocked, essentially was like 10-foot tall, really tall grasses, and it surrounded the entire food plot and provided a wall to make these deer feel comfortable using that food plot during the daylight. And it worked great. I did it 2 years ago. It worked really well. I did it again this year. It was working really well until like November. And I don't know what happened. I left and I was on a trip somewhere. And when I came back to hunt, my screen was just decimated. It was all on the ground. Like the year before, I had no issues. It stood all the way through winter. It worked out really well. This year, it did not stand well. And so once that cold weather hit, the food plot screen was down, and I think that lessened my opportunity to see a mature buck during daylight using that food plot because it wasn't as secure. So,
Gotcha.
This year I'm going to try to figure out a way to maybe adjust what I'm planting as that screen, or plant it in a thicker strip, or do something to try to make it stand up a little bit stronger throughout the winter, because I need that to make that food plot effective, and not be wide open to everyone driving around. So that's probably what I learned the most from my food plotting situation this past year. My challenge this year is going to be the fact that, as you know, Dan, I'm actually going to be living most of the summer, for a couple months of the summer, out west in the mountains. And so I'm not going to be back home able to work on my food plots. So what I need to do is I need to do a whole bunch of prep work in May, to try to get my food plots as ready to go as possible. And then hopefully have a friend or two. I've got a number of friends that are going to be coming by my property, checking out the house and all the different things around home. And hopefully they're going to be able to grab my four-wheeler and go to the food plots and spray them a couple times during the summer, just to keep the weeds down, so that when I get back in August, I'll be able to get in there and do my final prep. But it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. I'm going to have to plan a little bit more than I usually do, to make sure I get everything I possibly can do done in May, and then have everything ready to go in August to get those things in the ground. So it'll be a little bit interesting. And that kind of is applying to all of my deer planning, because again, I'm going to have this gap in the middle of the summer that usually I'd be doing deer projects, where I'm not going to be. So I'm going to have to do a lot of stuff in the spring, and then a little bit of stuff in the late summer. So got to plan. Got to do a lot more planning, a lot more stuff in April and May than usual.
Yeah, sounds like you're going to be busy.
Yeah, I will. But it'll be good. Going to going to continue to be hunting in Michigan and Ohio, and now I'm in the works right now of trying to establish a third place to hunt. Trying to find a property in northern Kentucky, maybe just south of my Ohio spot, or Illinois or Iowa. So now I'm bouncing around a whole bunch of different ideas, trying to see, can I get permission somewhere? Is there an affordable lease I can get? Those are the kind of things that I'm working through right now, and that's something that this time of year, it's a great time of year to do that kind of thing, is to start planning where you're going to hunt, trying to find new properties to hunt, talking to people, building relationships, trying to find those places, or just researching on your maps. We've talked about in past episodes about gaining permission on hunting land. Now's a great time to be working on that too. So that's a big part of my spring prep as well.
And we are going on Mark and myself are going on a hunting adventure out west for mule deer this year. So another thing is, if you have interest in Western hunting, now's the time to start looking into that, because the tags, the point systems, they have dates and ranges you have to apply for, and it's right now. Some states have already closed, let's say like their elk and their deer point purchasing system, so you'd have to wait until the next year to get your points. But if you're curious and you're interested, we just got done having a podcast with what was his name?
I think Robert Hanneman of the Hunting Fool.
Yep, and so listen to that podcast first. But just as a reminder that if you're planning on doing any Western hunting, right now is the time that you need to start preparing for it.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. That's something I always forget too. And even some whitetail states, in the next couple months, you need to start, buying your tags or your points. I think Iowa, you have to buy it before June, I think, and Kansas and some of the western states too. I think it's earlier in the year too. So if you're going out of state or heading out west or anything like that, look into those things. Make sure you know the regulations, and don't miss out on submitting your applications.
Yeah, it's a fact.
That is a fact. I think the only other thing that I want to mention about what we should be doing right now, we won't go into much detail on it. I want to have a couple podcasts, or at least one, diving deep into this again. But it's scouting, right? You should be scouting all year long, but really right now is one of the best times of year to scout, because in most states, at least the northern states, we're just starting to have our snow melt. And when that snow just melts, that's a perfect time to really start seeing some sign from the past fall. So we'll talk more about that in the future, but if you're itching to do some spring scouting, I'd really encourage you to listen to episode number 3 of the podcast. We had Dan Infalt on, and he talked about some of his spring scouting ideas, and that was really helpful stuff. And I actually just posted a blog post today sharing 5 tips from Dan Infalt about spring scouting. So we'll link to that in the show notes as well. That's some good stuff.
And speaking of itching, do your scouting now because you don't want poison ivy. I hate poison ivy. I get it real bad.
Me too. You know, you can actually get poison ivy in the winter though too. Did you know that?
Yep, I've got it every time of year. Every time I go out now, I'm wearing long sleeve everything. And I used to get it so bad. I remember the worst I got it. I was in the emergency room for 3 days.
Ugh.
It swelled my eyes shut. It was collapsing my throat. I was helping somebody burn some stuff, like a big pile of wood, and poison ivy got in there, and the smoke I was working in got in my eyes and in my throat, and I had poison ivy in my throat.
Oh, wow.
It was the worst 3 days of my life.
That sounds horrible.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, do your scouting now.
Yeah, avoid poison ivy. I thought I've had it bad. I've never had that bad. I got it. Did I tell you about last fall when I got it during hunting season? Or not last fall, it was the fall before, I guess.
I think you showed me a picture of your arm.
I got it on my face, and I got so bad I had to go into the doctor to urgent care or whatever. I was hoping they would just give me, I think it's prednisone or some kind of little steroid they give you when you have really bad poison ivy. Yeah. And instead they said I had to get the shot, and they gave me the shot. It's like the shot in your butt, and they gave it to me, and I just passed out. I don't know what happened, but I passed out. So I don't want to get poison ivy anymore because I don't want any more shots in my butt. I don't want any more passing out.
I just imagined this needle going in and you just going, ah, and then falling down.
It was the real feminine faint where I put my palm up to my forehead and then kind of swoon. That was exactly what I did. Yeah. Yep. Well, I think we should probably shut this episode down. What do you think?
Yeah. I want to say something real quick. Corey, if you're listening, you are welcome back next year. I'm just pulling your leg, but you still have to stand at the dinner table.
He does have to stand. No sitting.
No sitting allowed.
Oh, man, that was fun. That was a good time. Before we do shut down, I want to give one quick update. As of this morning, I haven't posted on the blog or anything yet, but as of this morning, the brand new Wired to Hunt hats and t-shirts are available for sale on wiredtohunt.com. So, yeah, pretty exciting.
I got mine on right now. I hope whoever that one guy is that you sent a free one to, I hope he hasn't got it yet because I have mine and I wore it all day yesterday and I wore it all day today. Well, I took it off while I was at work, but those hats are pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with them. I'm pretty stoked to be able to wear the new logo gear, and so yeah, go on the website. They're for sale. Anyone that likes the shirts and hats and wants to buy one, we really appreciate it. It helps us keep the podcast going. It helps keeps the blog afloat and all that. So we appreciate that help. We appreciate the support and hope you guys like it. Hope it's something that you'll be proud to wear and walk around town or the woods with. So
my shirt's in the mail, right?
It's not yet, but
you should have lied to me, Mark.
I know.
You should have said it's in the mail and I'll take an extra large.
I do have good news though. You did get one of the first hats because the guy who was supposed to get the hat first, my wife was handling the mail. I'm going to throw my wife under the bus here, but hopefully she won't listen to this.
You just did.
I did. She told me she was mailing them out, and I thought she mailed it out. And then today I went in the laundry room, and I saw the boxes were still there, and she hadn't sent them out yet. So you got it first.
Sucker.
Now that this listener of ours is never going to listen again because...
Exactly. Like, those guys are asses.
Yeah, geez, man. We better stop while we're still ahead, Dan. All right. Well, appreciate you guys listening to us ramble on today all about our shed hunting exploits and the different projects we have going on. But hopefully this was something, a little fun for a change because, over the past couple weeks we've had a lot of interviews, had a lot of guests on the show, but we haven't really got to talk about what me and Dan are doing. And so I hope that that's interesting on occasion. And, we'll continue to keep the great interviews and the great guests and the expert, strategies and advice. We'll keep that coming. But, of course, we want to also make sure that you guys, know what your hosts are up to. So that said, for show notes from this episode, we mentioned a couple things that we'll be linking to. Go to wiredtohunt.com/episode 47. You can also go there and get links to the new hats and shirts too. And as we always ask also, if you've enjoyed the show, if you could please leave us a rating or review on iTunes. It means the world, and it really helps the show out. I think right now we have 207 5-star reviews, if I last saw, which is incredible. So thank you, everyone who's done that. Also, we want to thank our partners who help keep the podcast on the air. Big thank you to Sitka Gear, Trophy Ridge, Bear Archery, Redneck Blinds, Huntera Maps, Huntsoft, and the Whitetail Institute of North America. Thank you. And finally, thank you to all of you guys and girls listening to us today. I hope you've got some big plans this spring, working on your prep for whitetail season. And of course, I hope you'll stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.